This will be a short video on making pancakes from scratch. So for making pancakes and waffles, you're going to do a method referred to as the muffin method. It's where you measure and sift all your dry ingredients, and you measure and mix all your wet ingredients separately, and then you mix them together and combine them until they've just barely combined. So for this, we'll start with the dry ingredients. We're going to need 8 ounces of flour, and an ounce of sugar, half an ounce of baking powder, which comes to about a tablespoon, and that's some salt, half a teaspoon of salt. So you can sift these together by running them through a strainer, a mesh strainer, or just one like this. Or you can usually get away with mixing them with a whisk. You want to, whole point is to get them kind of well distributed. Depending on how you prefer to do that. Since I'm going to use a whisk for the wet ingredients anyway, I prefer to use the whisk instead of having to clean a strainer. So for the wet ingredients, we need 3.5 ounces of eggs, which is about 2 large eggs. And so you want to beat these eggs so that they're not separate into the whites and the yolks. The entire purpose behind that has to do with, we want to work the liquid ingredients and the dry ingredients together into 2 separate but well mixed groupings, so that as we add them together, we don't have to over agitate the overall pancake batter. So for this, we need a pound, which is 16 ounces of milk. There we go. And then we also need 2 ounces of melted butter. You can use oil for this. I do prefer to use butter. Part of what this addition of fat does is, as we are cooking the pancakes in the pan, the presence of the fat will help keep it from sticking to the pan itself. You can always butter or spray the pan, but this is one thing that does help do that. So this is everything we need, dry and wet. So at this point, we're not going to use a whisk. So the whisk, if you use a whisk, it's going to be tempting to overmix it. At this point, when we're combining these, we want to just barely combine them. Most recipes will have wording in them that says mix until just combined. Do not overmix. So that is just literally just introducing the liquid to the dry. And then I'm going to use a spatula for this, just to get them mixing together. And we just want to get it to the point where we don't have exposed flour in the mixing bowl. So this is pretty good. You can see you can still see clumps in it, but we don't have pockets of flour on the surface. And that is where we want to go with that. And then we'll take it to the stove. So zoomed in a little bit, I got the pan on a medium-high heat. You can see if I flick some water into it, you should be able to hear that the water droplets just turning to steam and boiling out. So that's a good temperature to start at. So I'm just going to do 1 scoop of the batter. So I'll usually either use a 1/2 cup measuring to scoop this out or a small ladle like I'm doing here. It gives me a good kind of consistent measure as I go along. So what you're looking for here is you're looking for these bubbles that you see popping in the batter to in the center. When they pop and they don't reform, that's what we're looking for to know that it's time to flip the pancake. You can see how right now a lot of the air bubbles are, as they pop, they are reforming with the batter, but very slowly. This is now we're about halfway there. So you want to keep a close eye on it. And that's a measure of how deep into the pancake the heat has cooked it. When it reaches the point that the bubbles popping don't reform, you know that by flipping it, you just have to cook the other side and not anything in between the two sides. So as you go, just keep an eye out. Use your nose to, if you can, to smell. If it smells like it's browning a little early, you just adjust your temperature to what you need it at to get the right coloration that you want on them. I actually like this level of coloration, so it's fine. You could turn it down a little bit. This is right now on it was on a 7. My stovetop goes from low to high, high being 10, and so I've just bumped it down to a 6. Now after you flip it over, you're just giving it enough time to finish. So you don't need to leave it for an overdue amount of time. Usually like about 30 seconds is fine. And then you'll have a pancake. You can see the kind of craters cooked into it. Those will be good spots for maple syrup or anything else you choose to put on them. And what this will do is it'll give you a good kind of fluffy sponge of a pancake. They won't be too tough. If you mix the batter a ton, if you whip it a bunch with the whisk, you end up with tougher pancakes. If you think it's good and you've got a bubble here in the middle like we have right here that isn't popping yet, you can always touch it lightly. I will pop it. You can see it's starting to go together a little bit, but it should be good because it has slowed down. So you can see on a slightly lower temperature we get a much nicer kind of golden brown rather than a darker brown. And there we are. You can see the two different colorations depending on how long you left it in, but you can see that this is still soft. Once it's been off the stove, it won't be as hard, so even if it gets darker, they'll still be relatively light and fluffy.